Welcome back, everyone. Today we're pruning tomatoes. The process for this is the same whether you're going to prune these and then plant them in your garden, transplant them into a grow bag, another container, or even a larger pot. So we'll go ahead and go through this, and you'll do the same thing whether this is a determinate tomato or an indeterminate variety. However, how far you prune is what will differ. By knowing the variety, you'll be able to do a simple search on the internet, and that'll quickly tell you which type of tomato you have, determinate or indeterminate. In order to properly prune the tomato plant, we're going to need to understand and identify some of the parts of the plant, and it's very simple. First, you have the sun leaves, and these are going to be on all the sides around the tomato, and they'll go up in a spiral-like fashion. Here, you have the main stem. This is mostly going to go straight up or towards the light. And in between the sun leaves and the main stem, at roughly a 45-degree angle, you'll have what's called suckers. And this is mainly what we're going to be removing in order to make the plant more healthy and grow better. The first thing you can do is simply remove the seed leaves, and those will come out before you get any of the true leaves. And here you'll see there's a sucker down there as well, and we're going to go ahead and cut that. It's all you have to do in order to remove any of these parts, but knowing how much to trim or how much to prune is what's important. If you look closely, this plant is actually beginning to flower, and you can just see the pods right here at the tip of my shears. These will eventually turn into flowers, and then we'll get the tomatoes right from that spot. On a determinate type tomato, you can actually prune these all the way up to the first set of flowers. Continuing on, I'm going to remove the sucker and the sun leaf at the same time and do the same to the other side. Here you'll see we're actually gaining a lot of airflow. Airflow is incredibly important for tomatoes as they're highly susceptible to a lot of diseases. In fact, what you want to do is make sure you don't have any leaves too close to the soil and definitely don't want any leaves touching the ground. This will hold true whether it's a determinate tomato or an indeterminate type. Now you do want to leave a fair amount of greenery on the plant, that way it can soak in the sun and continue to grow. In this case, I'm going to take just one more of the sun leaves, and then this plant should be just fine. If you look carefully, you can see that there is a sucker still growing here, and another one will grow here. You'll continue to prune this plant even after you've transplanted it to its next location. But again, if this is a determinate type tomato, you'll only do so up to the point of the first set of flowers. If it's an indeterminate tomato, you'll continue to do this as the plant grows. Now, I've got a second tomato plant to help better show off the next thing I want to talk about, and that has to do with how deep you can plant your tomatoes. This particular plant has longer hairs along the main stem. Now, all tomato plants have this, and plants have the capability of actually rooting wherever these hairs come out, all the way up to the top of the plant. That means when you take your tomato and plant it in your garden or in a larger container, all of those hairs have the ability to form roots and give the plant a much better foundation. That means the next step is to fill your pot if you're using a pot, a grow bag, or whatever you may be doing. In this case, I happen to be transplanting these into larger containers because I still have about another 2 weeks before I can transplant them outside. After your pot's filled, you want to make a large impression or a hole in the middle of the pot. And that means that we can then take the roots, tomato plant and all, and place it as deep down as possible in order to help this plant. Now this plant wouldn't be much better off if I planted it like this, because we're not taking advantage of any of these extra roots that we now have access to on this plant. So I'm going to go ahead and put this plant fairly deep down. Keep in mind, tomatoes are incredibly vigorous plants, so you don't need to be super careful when transplanting, but you certainly don't want to abuse your plants either. For comparison, I've now pruned the other tomato plant, and you can see just how much deeper this plant is now going to be. This is going to be a tremendous benefit to the plant. Now, depending on your situation, you may want to plant the tomatoes in various ways. You can plant them crooked, you can plant them sideways. It will continue to grow up, especially if you support them with a stake or a cage. Now, I mentioned that you can plant a tomato plant sideways, and that's just fine. One of the reasons you might want to do that is if your planting space isn't particularly deep. You can plant the tomato going lengthwise, and then the tomato will still grow abundant roots that'll help feed the plant. Take a look at how much additional airflow this plant now has, and this is going to be a much healthier plant now that it's been pruned properly. One final reminder, you'll want to continue to do so up until you see the first set of flowers for determinate types, and you'll continue the pruning process for the entire lifespan of the plant if it's indeterminate. In just those 2 small plants that you saw in this video, this is how much total greenery has been removed. So you can remove a fair amount and the plant will do just fine. In fact, it's better off. Here's an example of just how quickly you can prune your tomatoes now that you've learned what to do. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch and have a great day.